Hello, everybody. My name is Jake, and I am here with my fantastic, amazing co host,
Wow,
Jolie,
that's hard
this
to live up
week
to.
again. What fantastic and
I
amazing is
know,
hard to live
wow,
up to?
that's a lot.
Um, Today we are here back with another episode of Seriously, the Life in Business podcast.
Mm.
This week, as I understand, we were going to talk about the weird conundrum, some may put it, as remote work
Mm.
in the remote workspace, because it is, after COVID, so much bigger than it ever has been,
Yes.
still to this day. So I don't even know where we start. Do we just start with what defines remote work to each of us? Because I do think, I mean, it's a pretty clear definition, obviously, but just so everyone understands where we're starting from, I guess.
Okay, why don't you start and then I'll jump in and share my perspective, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I was just gonna say, like, I think there's like levels of remote work. I think there's remote work that's hybrid remote,
Hmm.
where it's you live in the same state, you can go physically to the office, but you work remote, as in from home,
A couple
with
times
the
would be
option.
hybrid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That would be sometimes you're in the office, sometimes you're not in the office.
for sure. And then there's well, I would call that like local remote because I know as a person who's sent out job applications, some people won't hire you even remote if you're not in the same state,
That's because they want a
right?
hybrid relationship with you, or it's a tax related issue.
Yeah. And that's something to keep in mind. So
Hmm.
there's the local remote for whatever reason you are locally remote, but local remote, which is like near the offices, but you're still remote. And then there is long range remote, which is like living in New York, working for someone in California. That there's that. There is also international remote work, which I have done,
Mm.
where you work for another company in another country, which is also a thing. And those are kind of the many layers. I think we're really focused on the first two. I don't think international,
Well,
that's a whole other complication, I feel,
yeah.
but
I feel like to make it as simple as possible for the new career people, either there are some setups. When I first started working, especially because I was in manufacturing and I was tied to a factory,
mhm.
and most people tied to factories or in retail or something where you're interacting with other people that are physically doing something,
Mhm.
buying something, making something, configuring something, then that's an in the office job.
Yeah, for sure.
And pretty much when I started working long time ago, every job was like that. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't travel sometimes or I didn't go places on business trips and that was work,
Mhm.
but I didn't need nor have a home office. And in fact, I didn't even have a laptop until probably 2007. Before that, I had a big desktop. And even being a director, I had a cell phone, I had a beeper when I first started working in the 90s, and you'd get a beep and then you'd have to call, which was never a good thing. But I probably didn't have a cell phone consistently until around 2000. And yes, I would take calls. Yes, I would answer questions. Now, this is speaking from somebody who's considered exempt, meaning you get paid a flat amount no matter how many hours that you work,
Mhm.
although there's an expectation that you work a typical
Yeah.
40-hour week. And then you had probably, I'm thinking about when did I first start having we didn't even call them remote days. I think that's more of a COVID terminology. But really, starting around 2008, 2009, being an executive director or a senior director, I can't remember what the title was then, I had days that I worked from home, but we called it work from home. And I usually did that because in the job that I had a business partner that was local with me in Phoenix. I had a
Mhm.
business partner that was in Bangalore, India, and I had a business partner that was in New Jersey. And so if I was focused on something in New Jersey and I didn't travel, because I used to travel all the time, then I might work from home so I didn't have any foot interruptions or people catching me in the office. But that was, we called it work from home day. I'm having a work from home day. And then with the onset, I think, of COVID, not that it wasn't happening a little bit before that, but we went remote. And most businesses of any size really put in place all time of systems and processes to be able to work remote. So I think back even, back in the, let's say around 2008, 2009, 2010, I was traveling all the time and I used to have a little, believe it or not, you couldn't get to hotspots or you had to pay for a hotspot. So I had this little thing that plugged into the side of my laptop and it created like a hotspot for me. It gave me internet, but it was outrageously expensive. I want to say it was like $300 a month per person. And so it was a big deal to justify that you needed one. And then I could work from an airport or I could work from my hotel. But the company, and it was a huge multinational company with over 200,000 employees, we were not set up for remote work like that. So the few of us that had to travel constantly, and you were always having to re-justify why you needed this device so that you could work, because they'd say, well, work when you get into the office, because that kind of remote work was you traveled to get to another work location. So I was in Phoenix, but I would travel to LA or I would travel to Albuquerque or Columbus, Ohio, or Kansas City, or New York City, or Bangalore, or Pune, or Shanghai, or whatever. But the thought was, well, you're going to be, when you get there, you'll be on company property most of the time, and you'll work that way. And then you did everything from a BlackBerry, which seemed like the most advanced thing in the history of the world until, of course, the iPhone came out. But so that was more, you traveled and you kind of worked remote, but you didn't call it remote. And then when COVID happened, then everybody had to invest in these remote environments. And even, believe it or not, when I first started traveling for work, the concept was always, well, does the company pay for your internet at home?
Mm.
Nowadays, I would say, no, it's not my responsibility to pay for your internet at home, simply because everybody has internet at home. But back in the early 2000s, up until maybe 2013, 14, 15, a lot of people didn't have internet at home. And so it's evolved over time. And then I think the hybrid came along because people who had gone remote didn't want to go back into the office.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's Jolene's history of how this evolved. But I think what we wanted to talk about was the tips and tricks of being remote or being hybrid.
Well, and just like I think our opinions on it, because I think it's a very interesting divide in who, because especially I know my generation really likes the
Well,
idea of remote
and
work.
there's a generational gap.
There is, for sure.
I would say people that are even 5 to 10 years older than me, and I'm 55, tend to not embrace remote work.
Yeah.
And they tend to see it as, well, they're not working.
Mm-hmm.
They're not working all day. So I'm paying for 8 hours and maybe they're working 4.
Well, and it is interesting because I remember I did some statistic research going
Okay.
into, right, for
Oh,
fun.
good.
And I was like, I feel like most positions, like there are some positions I can see the argument for remote work. Like if you're definitely like in social media marketing or something, yeah, I can see the argument for it because it's like you would just, no matter where you are, it's the same thing that you're doing. And I'm not trying to validate whether it should be or shouldn't be. But what I thought was interesting is that a lot of positions that are remote or hybrid roles tend to be available to positions that are senior level more than any other level, which makes sense
Well,
because
it
further along, but
it does. And here's part of, I think, why there is a bit of a negative stigma around a fully remote job. When we all had to go remote, and most of your generation probably wasn't working at this time, or they were starting
they were
school
or
just
just
starting.
entering the
Yeah.
workforce.
The concept was we went remote and we didn't necessarily have a lot of experience to know what those challenges were going to be.
Yeah.
And this is what I wanted to add on the tips and tricks. Not everyone is a responsible remote worker.
For sure. Yeah.
And I will give you an example here of a very experienced professional that I hired. Literally, I knew her from prior lives. I hired her after basically her tracking me down, figuring out we were in the same city. And she convinced me to hire her, even though I hadn't had the best experience with her where we'd worked before. But she said all the right things, right? Oh, I've learned from my mistakes, blah, blah, blah. And she was actually a couple years older than me. So I thought, okay, here's a woman at the time in her 50s. She's been working since she was in college. She did a co-op type of job. And she had been remote when I had known her before. Even though you didn't have a lot of, well, she hadn't done remote, but she worked from a home office because she traveled 90% of the time. And so she worked from home office and traveled. My experience with her was during the workday, it was very difficult to get a hold of her, which was frustrating. And that's the number one tip I would give to everybody who goes in to a new job and it's either hybrid or it's remote. You need to understand that between the hours of 8 and 5 or whatever your hours are, you need to dedicate yourself to work. Now, I've been remote too. Don't get me wrong. Would I take a break and go get a cup of coffee or run a quick errand or throw some laundry into the laundry machine? Yes, but you keep your cell phone or you take your laptop with you everywhere you go.
Yeah, it's like I think one thing that's for sure as well is a lot of people think remote work is, well, I mean, like you said, a lot of people are more lax about it,
Well,
right?
they
And
don't
act more lax about
understand the
it.
importance. And from my perspective, you need to do as a new person that she didn't do. She literally just had her office in her bedroom. Now, sometimes I get that you don't have a choice. But if you're going to be a professional who either works hybrid or who works remote, you need to have a dedicated workspace that you're going to spend time in. So if your bedroom is upstairs and you're hybrid or you're remote and you are going to be down in the kitchen doing stuff or whatever, you don't keep your stuff up in your bedroom where you're never going to be. Find a corner in your kitchen or set up a little den area or put it somewhere where you can hear it, because not only was I frustrated that that was happening, but she obviously wasn't even paying attention because she couldn't even tell on her phone that somebody was calling. Well, that's all connected. And so, and that just became an ongoing issue for her. Now, later she took a job that was hybrid, and then that was the issue. Well, people think, oh, I'm in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, or I think she was in the office Tuesday, Thursday. I'm hybrid Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Some people work in a way that when you're in the office and you're needing them, it feels like they don't think they work on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can't find them. Nothing gets done. They don't attend meetings or they're late. There's no activity during the day. And I would say before COVID, I worked at a different company. And one of the things that we did, because we did have people, as we closed offices and consolidated into big hubs, we had really great employees that were stranded. And we said, well, you could work remote because you have this great history with us. And in HR, I can remember really clearly us going through people's logs to say, when did they log on in the morning? How many emails did they return? How many calls did they make? How many hours were they in the intranet navigating? And I think I became cynical from that because there were people with director and above titles that worked remote that maybe were really connected to work for an hour a day. Now, the assumption that one makes when one becomes a little bit cynical, like me, is, well, are they working another job or are they just not working at all?
Yeah.
And that's the number one piece of advice I would give you. Let's say you do have a social media type of job or a job that you can really focus on in a set period of time intensely and get everything done that's needed to be done. Fine. But don't let the systems clock that on you. Because believe me, every system is sophisticated enough to know every keystroke you make. And so if you have 3 hours of absolutely no interaction with your laptop or your systems, that can be discovered.
Well, and it is interesting because I know as I was poking around, there was an interesting phase just as COVID was hitting heavy, in some businesses and stuff like that, which in fairness, I was like leaving high school, so
Hmm.
I would not have seen any of this. But I know one thing that is interesting is there was a lot of miscommunication on tech availability. You know, I heard when I was doing my research that when COVID first hit and all these businesses shut down and stuff, there were people who didn't have laptops. There are people
That's
who didn't have
correct. Back
phones. There are
then,
people,
yes.
and that's very interesting. And I also am now in an interesting position where there's I've noticed a lot of remote positions where when I've done mine in the past, they were you have a screen recorder or they have some sort of tracker or whatever, right? And that makes sense to me in offices, that makes sense to me in a lot of places. What became interesting, and I don't know how far these went along, I didn't look too far into it. There were lawsuits over it
Yeah, there were.
because of privacy concerns,
But if you're on a
which is
company
interesting.
laptop, there is no privacy.
I agree, but
Yeah.
during COVID, that wasn't always the case. They forced you to download something that did it.
Well, I, maybe that's true. I'm not aware of that because I didn't work at a single company that we didn't issue you company
Yeah. But
stuff.
I can even say when I worked remote for the company, when I worked in the London company,
Hmm.
they made me download something
Hmm.
on my computer. And when I was reading that, I was like, that's very interesting because I could definitely see why that caused even more conflict in the remote
Yeah.
workspace because it's like, on one hand, I get it because especially as you share your experiences, that angle of from their perspective, if they were in a situation like that and had experiences similar to you, I totally understand why they would want to do that, and of course you have to approve it and say yes, I'm okay with this and yada 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 and
Yeah,
sign all
you're
that off
waiving your right
for
to have,
sure.
yeah.
So I get it. But I don't know. I do think that is interesting, but not to divert us too much. You wanted to go more into tips and tricks and stuff,
Well, and
right?
I think what's important is, and that's what I was hitting on, is you've got to make sure, and I'm not, you should work,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're being paid 8 hours a day, you should work eight
Mm-hmm.
hours a day. However, I am not a hypocrite,
Mm-hmm.
and I am not going to suggest that on the days that I was remote, I worked a full 8 hours at my desk all day, every day.
What?
Some days I did,
Yeah.
but many times it was a light day for me.
Well, and something I'll throw in too is there is also a difference between, and I know me and you have talked about this not on the podcast, but we've talked about it like peer to peer, is the angle of some people can do 8 hours of work
Mm-hmm.
in 6 hours or in 4 hours or whatever. And while I wouldn't lean on that mentality of any extent, that is something that would help you gauge, am I working enough?
Well,
Right?
and here's the thing, when you're, and this is why I think people get frustrated. When you're in the office, yes, the same trackers are there. People
Mm-hmm.
can see that. But more often than not, your leaders, your managers, your HR group, if they're asked to be involved in some kind of investigation, are going to be looking at, do you come to work on time
Mm-hmm.
and do you work your 8 hours? That's what
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be looking at, because there is an assumption, which I think is a fair assumption, that when you're in the office, you're going to have meetings.
Yeah.
They're going to take you away from your desk so you're not engaged with your computer.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be in a meeting room. Or you're going to be pulled to go help Sally at her desk. Or there's human interaction, which I do believe is irreplaceable,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I think a hybrid role is is better than a remote role,
I agree.
because
Yeah.
I do think people start to feel disconnected. And I will say, and I'm digressing before I get back to tips and tricks. There's three examples in particular of people that I know that had worked remote for periods of time before COVID, probably because, you know, like I said, offices consolidated and they were kind of stranded, but they were a good employee, and so you let them work remote. In all three of those cases, two are women, one are men, in case anybody's curious, there became a bit of a social anxiety associated with that. And I think it's because they weren't getting out and forcing themselves to engage with people every day. And maybe they already had a little bit of a social disposition not to want to engage, which I, if left on my own, I could live by myself and never interact with other people, be just
I can lock
perfectly
myself in a
happy.
chamber and you'll never find me
Well, I
again.
mean, I would be okay just puttering around my house and not even going to the store and stuff, probably, because I can do everything I ever want to do online. But I do force myself to do stuff
Hmm.
because I do know that it's like anything, any muscle not used gets lost. And so if you're not forced to engage in the social environment of work, the little chitter chat by the water cooler, so to speak, or, going to the break room and seeing people, or walking down the hall and seeing people. And I even see it with people in the office. They never leave their office. They go in, they shut the door, and they never leave their office. And that's not seen as a successful person in a career perspective. People do notice that. Um, but I think that's part of the problem with folks that don't ever have any interaction in the office. So that's the reason why I'm saying I prefer hybrid work to 100% remote work, because I
Hmm.
do think the community matters. And for your generation in particular, where you want to be part of communities, you want to be supporting your communities, sometimes you have to get out there to understand the community. So I will say that. But getting back to why is it important? Yes, some people can get work done in 4 hours or 5 hours that would take other people 6 hours. And I use myself as an example of, you've heard me say before, I like to get in the office 2 hours, but I like to be in the office by 6.
Yeah, yeah, because you like doing
And
all
people
your
don't
stuff
come in.
before you
Yeah.
have the
And I have
meetings.
2 real strong hours of getting busy work done or
Hmm.
planning work done or catch up work done before I had to go into meetings. And the type of career that I selected in HR really does not lend itself easily to remote work. Maybe one day a week where you're getting caught up on your office and administrative work, but you really have to be present with people. You have to be engaging with people. But having said that, when you're remote, the the latitude or the understanding, I don't know what the right word is I'm looking for, that, well, you're in the office, and even if you're not at your desk and I can't clock time, I know you're in the building. So you didn't leave the building. And yes, there are people that hide out in the building. There's some people that, well, we know they go and they hide out in that meeting room and that's what they do all day. And so that's a different reason to address. But when you're remote, if you're in meetings, I'm going to see that on the computer.
Hmm.
If you're a data person, I'm going to see that you're in systems in the computer, or I'm going to clock that you're working in the computer and I can see that the computer is active. It hasn't gone dormant.
Hmm.
Now, in most large companies, I can see every single keystroke you make if
Hmm.
I want to go back and dig that out. Now, I don't see it real time, although, IT can always, they can come in and watch what you're doing, even though you don't know that they're watching what you do, because that is not your property. That
Hmm.
is company property. And that does happen a lot of times without employees knowing it, that HR and usually the ethics officer will give an approval to go in and watch what they're doing because there's been a report of bad behavior.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't tell you how many times it's been about porn, people using their computers for porn. And let me tell you, it will be found out if that's what you're doing, or people are watching movies
Hmm.
or all kinds of stuff. So my point is, if you are one of those people that can get a lot of work done, don't walk away from your computer for hours at a time and think, oh, it's never going to be found out. It will be found out. So make sure you're engaging and you're disciplined to go in there. Now, if out of an 8 hour period of time, you're engaging every hour in something through your computer and it's active and I can see that you're moving, but it's only for 20 or 30 minutes, I'll probably give you the benefit of the doubt, because I'll say, well, maybe they were working on the computer, then they stopped to do something offline. But if you're 4 hours not on the computer and you're not in an office, what are you doing offline for that
Well, and
period of
it's
time?
so it's very interesting. I remember, and I mentioned the whole how much work can you do in a certain amount of time thing,
Mm-hmm.
because I know in one of my internship positions, I was a marketing intern, and they just didn't have much for me to do.
But you were in the office.
But I was in the office, yeah,
Uh-huh.
and I don't know about the keystrokes, yada 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 yada. But like I know I would get stuff done within 4 hours of showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be periods, not to discredit the team, but clearly they just didn't prepare for someone like me coming into
Well,
that
and
position.
they were going to meetings and stuff without you. So where you felt like, oh, I'm sitting here with nothing to do, they might have been in a meeting for 2 hours.
Well, yeah, but I always look at it like it was like I would finish something and it would be multiple days
Yep.
before I get something new. And that's weird. And something I would always make sure to do because I would be in that position is like, well, I'll find something I can do. I would read up on the site, I would research things, whatever, for preparation of anything. But I would always, because there might be other people in that position, what I always did is I sent an email to the person who was giving me tasks and said, hey, I finished my tasks. You can see I finished them here, yada, 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 yada. What else do you need me to do? So I have some sort of receipt of me saying, hey, if it never
I'm
did.
waiting for something.
But if something ever came up and I don't know, IT came to me and they said, you haven't done anything on your computer in 2 days. And I'm like, well, it's because I haven't been given anything in
Well,
2 days. But
this is what I would say. Your situation was different. And in my experience, if you're in the office, nobody's going to be looking at your keystrokes unless they can't find you.
no, for sure. But I'm saying like
So-
if you really want to be particular about you did what you were assigned to do and you don't have anything assigned to you and you're worried of something like that, because there are horror stories of stuff like that happening.
Well, and I agree with what you're saying, but I think it is a slippery slope. And let me tell you why it's a slippery slope. I think if you're in the office, which you were, absolutely that makes total sense. And then you can do other stuff.
Yeah.
You can even just Google stuff on your computer as long as it's not inappropriate for the work setting, right? Or you could, I hate to say read a book, but you could go through the handbook, or you could do things that
Read
aren't
through
even,
the websites.
yeah, even if you're not, you could look at websites in similar companies and educate yourself. Or I hate to say this, but even if you say, hey, I'm going to go over to the cafeteria and instead of taking a 15-minute break, I'm going to take a 30-minute break. If you're in the office, there are a lot of passes on all of that. But if you're sitting at home and you do that, which I would say still do that, send a note saying, hey, I'm waiting for my next assignment. Don't then leave your
No,
computer.
I agree. I wouldn't say that.
Yeah. No, and I know that you weren't, but I think people could take that of, well, I sent a note.
No,
That's
you
not
still want to be
enough.
on the
Yeah.
computer doing things.
And
Like I
it-
said, researching,
Yeah.
doing your work or doing not
Because
your work, but what you have
to
that
be
you can do.
completely honest, and this might be a little unfair, this might be given a little bit of a secret, but nobody wants to go in and look at all of your keystrokes.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And it takes almost an act of Congress because, in every company that I've been at, it takes 2 approvals for somebody in IT to get in and look at your stuff.
Yeah.
It takes the head of HR and it takes the ethics officer. Both of those people have to agree that, yes, you can crack into their computer. Or you can look at their history, you can read their emails. Because there has to be a business reason why you're going to do that. Otherwise, it's just a free-for-all, and that's not okay. People have to have some level of confidence that we're not trying to catch them and stuff. And so I will tell you, of the times that somebody came to me and said, hey, we want to look at their computer, I probably said no more times than I said yes.
Gotcha.
And so the thought of you being paranoid that just randomly people are going to get into your computer and look at exactly what you've been doing is when you've gotten to the point where you're in trouble, that's going to start happening. But proactively, what I would say is I would ask IT, well, when you look at their usage, what does their usage look like? Are they engaged, regardless of what they're doing? I'm not talking about that. But are they in the system? Is the computer active? Have things not gone, dormant? How many hours of a typical day? And if they come in and say, well, 6 hours a day, they're in the system and they're working on stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so they're in the PeopleSoft system, or they're in the SAP system, or they're in the email system, or they're using the internet. And if IT, or it wouldn't be IT, it would be the business wanting to do a check on them. And the business says, yes, we looked at 25 days. Of the 25 days, they average 6.5 hours a day in the system. I'd say, well, then I don't understand what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Why are you wanting to know what they're doing? Did you have a report that they're looking at inappropriate material? Do you have some reason to believe that they're doing something that is unethical or immoral? And if they say yes, what's that evidence? right? And so I don't want people to be paranoid, although I'm sure there are companies out there looking at everything all the time.
Oh,
That
well, 1,000%.
the company doesn't really want to be doing that because that's resources that they have to pay. That as long as everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, you don't want to pay for that.
Yeah.
And usually it takes quite a bit of work and the right IT person to get in there and do that. But you've got to make sure that you're not just walking away from your computer. And that's to be honest with you, when I was deeply engaged in these, that's what we would find. We had a vice president once that I basically had my senior HR person say, he's not making progress on his accounts. And the allegation is that he's working another job. And that happened a lot just before COVID and just after COVID, that people were trying to work two jobs and draw two incomes. And so most offers post COVID say something like, you will dedicate the substantial portion of your workday to us. Because that
Well, and
got
now
around that.
I don't know if it says. I guess that would be an IRS document, not necessarily a business document. But I know that nowadays, when I've gotten new positions, you have to sign that part off and say, "Are you working other jobs at the
Yes.
same time?"
Because people were abusing that, and that's why, and I think that's why the people just a little bit older than me, and even to me to some extent, it's one of the first questions I'll ask, well, do you think they're working a second job? Because in that, I would say maybe even 19, maybe even before COVID hit, but certainly 20, 21, 22, and into 23, people just picked up and moved across the country. And so then you call them back to work and they're like, well, I can't come back to work because this job's in Indiana and I live in Kansas now. Well, did you quit? Well, no, but we were hybrid. Okay. Or we were remote, but we never said you were going to be remote forever. And so then you got into that issue and then you found out most of them had done that is, not all of them. That's not fair. I won't even say most, but a lot of people were working multiple jobs. And usually where you caught them is that they would send an email from the wrong account because it was difficult to keep those two things separately.
Yeah.
But that's, and I even had people, and this really is very frustrating. I had people in HR that would resign and give like 6 weeks notice. And in that 6 weeks, they'd be working their other job until you couldn't find them. And you'd be like, okay, we had I called you at 2:00. Oh yeah. And there would, you can tell because the excuses are not good excuses. Or to be like, you didn't show up for this 8:00 meeting. They came at 8:30. Where were you? Oh, I had something I had to do. What is more important between 8 and 5 than your job? And if you're not coming, it's noticeable that you didn't show up for the meeting. And so I think you need to use a lot of common sense if you're going to be remote, if you're going to be a hybrid, if you're not going to be engaged 8 hours a day. And again, I wasn't always engaged 8 hours a day when I was working remote. The illusion has to be there that you're watching emails on your phone then. Or, I mean, my family can attest to this. I never went anywhere, even when I was on vacation, without my work cell phone on me. And I don't think I ever went on vacation without taking my laptop with me. And sometimes I would leave what we were doing to go back to the hotel to do something on my laptop, even though I was on vacation. So if I'm willing to do that, now granted I'm more of a senior leader, maybe you don't need to do it when you're on vacation. Maybe that's not the right behavior to model. But if they think you're working, you better do that. Whatever you're doing that's distracted you from work, and maybe you went out to dinner or went out to lunch with your spouse, or maybe you're out building a shed. I don't know what you're doing. Maybe you're watching Netflix. You need to make sure you are constantly watching your email traffic. You're constantly looking at IM. Stay on IM. And this is a thing that you can tell too. I don't know how many people have Teams, but on Teams, I can tell how long it's been since you were active on Teams. So even me being in the office, if I would go inactive from Teams, a lot of times I'd go in and just reload Teams or send out a hi to somebody so that I would stay active in Teams. And that's normally what I would ask when I would have somebody come to me. I'd say, well, when do they fall inactive on Teams? Because for the most part, if you're engaging with people on Teams, which is probably, and it could be a different platform. I'm just using Teams as an example because Microsoft Teams is everywhere. Usually you're chatting with people all day long. on Teams. I did chat with people all day long on Teams. That was our number one way of getting general information out. And when that, you didn't even log into Teams all day long, that tells me that you're not active in Microsoft, because as long as you're in the Microsoft program, you're going to stay active on Teams. Now, there are tricks around that too. Like, I just always set myself as active even though I wasn't active, because that way it wouldn't
I was
go.
about to say that is
Yeah.
not a foolproof solution,
No,
just to be clear.
That's what I would do. But people
But-
don't think about it, right? Because this is another thing
This
that your
very
boss.
quickly went from you saying, complaining about people not being active, to here is your tips
Well-
and tricks to pretend being active.
Well, no, I'm not even saying pretend being active. But what I would say is, here's another thing: is if I looked at, I had one manager in particular, I would look at him, and he will have never been inactive. So 8:00 at night, he's active on Teams. 4:00 in the morning, he's active on Teams. I know that he set his status to active. And so I would call him and say, you probably forgot to take yourself off active status. Make sure that logs with your real time.
I would just close the thing, I guess, at that point, wouldn't you? Because it doesn't. I don't know how Teams works.
Well, in
but-
Teams, you can pick show away, show is confidential.
Yeah,
If you're presenting on your laptop, it'll say they're presenting. But you go in there, and if you've selected stay active,
It'll stay active even if you close it?
no, if you close it, it won't. But
Oh,
he'd
then
just leave it
close
running in
yeah.
the background.
That's your problem.
And
just close
so,
it.
yeah. But the thing is, when you reopen it, it's not going to keep that active. You're going to have to reset it. It goes
yeah.
back to the default. And again, I'm not trying to say this is what you do to appear to be. Just know this is your job. You're
and
supposed to be
here's the
working. You're
thing.
being
So
paid to work.
I want to be less like, because
I sound negative.
you were very when the phrase you used was use common sense, which I get. I think you're undermining it a little bit. Here's a better way to put it, right?
Okay.
Or over dramatizing it a little bit. If you are in a remote position, if you have a hybrid position, you are given that, and I look at it like this: you are given that as the company's kind of giving you like what's the word?
They're trusting you.
They're trusting you.
Yes.
And they're giving you leeway, and you shouldn't abuse that trust or leeway, and you should meet them in kind. If they are giving you the opportunity to work remote, to be able to have that position, you should equal with them and say, I will be checking my stuff, I'll make sure I'm active, stuff like that. And that is what you should do if you're in a position where you have a remote position.
No, I think you're right.
I think that's the way. That's
Yeah.
a nicer way to put it than use common sense.
The reason I say common sense is, to me, it's common sense that you're going to take an hour lunch. You're going to have to go to the bathroom periodically.
Yeah.
You might have to run to the door because somebody rang your doorbell. That's all common sense to me. And that's okay. I mean, if I asked one of my people, hey, I was trying to get a hold of you and I couldn't get a hold of you, once in a blue moon, if they said something like, oh, I had a dentist appointment, I just forgot to put it on the calendar. Okay. But I would tell all of my people, I'm not going to micromanage your time. But if you're out of the office, I need to know that you're out of the office, because if something comes up and you're the person to answer the question and you're not available, I'm going to have to make that decision for you. And I would much rather be able to tell, like I had one, in my last position, I had one HR person who went between multiple locations. And I would say, I don't care what day you're at the other locations. We had a one-on-one on Tuesday, so I'd like to do the one-on-one in person, but you need to go wherever you need to go. But I do need to know if you're not in the office, if you're not here.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, yes, it'd be nice to know where you're at, but because when somebody pops into my office and they want an HR opinion, I'm going to say, well, go see Sally. Well, if Sally's not in the building, then I know I need to take care of it for Sally.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's just a courtesy. And so, this particular person was very responsible, never had any concerns. In fact, if anything, she kind of maybe
Overachiever?
Well, yeah, she was a bit of a workaholic.
Workaholic.
Because there'd be times she'd call me at 7:00 at night and I'd say, why are you still in the office? This will wait for tomorrow. Just go home. And it's not that I minded her calling me, but you need to have some boundaries here, right? And I certainly appreciate the dedication, and certainly that gave me a lot more faith in her because I knew she was going to work until the job got done. But I would always, and I did the same thing when I was traveling. I I went to another location every Wednesday, and I put it right on my calendar. This is where I am on Wednesday. And that way the people that I went to see knew that I was supposed to show up there. So if I had a car accident, hopefully they'd say, "Where's Joey? Why didn't Joey show up? She's usually here by 6 o'clock. Where is she?" And then, the people in my normal office, would know, well, it's Wednesday. And I usually had a calendar that I put on my door. And there was a whole year that I was doing negotiations. And every week I put a calendar up, "Where's Joey?" And it said, "I'm here, I'm here, I'm here," because I want people to be able to find me. It's real easy. And this is office politics. Well, we haven't seen the CHRO in 3 weeks. Is she working another job? Well, I was in contract negotiations from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night off site. And so even though I got there at 6, I was gone long before anybody came into the office. And then they'd say, "Where is she? She's not here. Where is she?" And that was always my concept. And, I'd say, "Here's my cell phone if you need to call me." And I think it's, when your boss calls you, you need to pick up.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in a meeting, that's the great thing about a Teams or your phone. You can, and I tried to do this with my business partners. I'm in a call or I'm in a meeting. I'll get back to you as soon as the meeting ends. It's supposed to be done at the top of the hour or the bottom of the hour, or we're just running over. Give me 10 minutes. Those are things that go a long way. And, let's say this is the one day of the week in your remote job that you ran to McDonald's to get lunch and you left at 11 instead of 12 because you wanted to get out of traffic. You can still, that's okay. That's not unreasonable. That to me is common sense. I want a little bit early, whatever, but somebody's trying to get you, then you just simply say, "I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you in 10 minutes?"
Well, and here's the thing, right? So I remember when I was in a position, right, where I had, and it only happened, I think, once.
I thought you were talking about her emergency.
It was. It
Oh,
was an
okay.
emergency situation someone else had that I
Oh,
was the contact for.
okay.
Right.
Okay, I gotcha.
So somebody, she had an emergency, and it was right at the start of the workday. I remember, and it started technically right before the workday, but it went into the workday. So I still arrived at the office. I still clocked in. I did all the stuff I needed to do, and what I did is we had these little cubbies where you could call in that clearly were out of use at this point in time because they were dial phones that just there was no purpose for anymore. But I remember I sat in one of those for probably 25-ish minutes dealing with that emergency. And I remember when I walked out, nobody really needed me in that moment. But I remember when I arrived and I saw my boss at the time and my coworkers, I said, "Can you just give me 15, 20 minutes? I need to take this call. It's really important." And they're like, "Yeah, sure." And it's that was one instance in
Yes.
that short contract time I had. But because I was so courteous and said, "Hey, this is just a minute. I'll get back to it. Just give me a second." They were able to give me that courtesy because they had seen me give a similar courtesy in the past from how I worked and how clear I was when I had situations take place and things like that, right? So,
And I think most people understand that things pop up and you're doing your best to deal with it. And to me, that's the common sense of it of, hey, this is an emergency I have to deal with. I don't need to leave, but I need to take the call. And that's fine. That's not a problem. But I do think that it's how you cue it up. I think it might be human nature to say, "Oh, well, no one will ever know about it. I'll just do it real quick."
don't assume that.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible, but it's
Don't assume it,
probably
though.
okay.
You should never assume
Yeah.
that.
Well, and I think back, we all learn things. I think back years ago now, because my daughter, I think, was maybe 7 or 8, and she's now almost 19, so it's been a long time ago. I had promised to take her to get her hair done. She wanted a haircut. She wanted to get highlights and stuff, or I can't remember. Maybe she was too young for that, but there was something that we were going to go and get her hair done at this special place. And I made an appointment, and then something popped up that day, and I did so I think I had taken the day off, and then something happened. I couldn't take the day off because I had a meeting or something in the morning. I should have called my boss, or I should have told my boss, "Okay, when that meeting's over, I'm going to take the rest of the day off." But I didn't. I just said, "I'm going to cancel my vacation day." Now, I wasn't off with my daughter for 6 hours, but probably 2.5 hours during the day. Now, again, someone who starts their day at 6 o'clock and doesn't end their day till 6 o'clock, I didn't feel guilty
Yeah.
about stepping away for a couple of hours. But my boss called me while I was with my daughter at the salon. And I ignored the first call. I just let it go to voicemail. And the second call came, and then I texted her and said, I'm at an appointment, which was true. My daughter had an appointment, but that's ambiguous too. Whose appointment?
Wording, very, very
I'm at an
ambiguous
appointment.
wording.
Do you need me to step out and call you back? And she said yes. So I did. I stepped outside of the building, and she said, blah, 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 blah. And she goes, I thought you were working today. I said, well, I am. I had it as vacation. I canceled vacation for that meeting, but I still wanted to take this appointment. And then when I got home, I was going to check back in, which is not untrue. I was going to check back in. I just wasn't going to work the rest of the day because in my mind, it was kind of vacation day. And she goes, well, I need you to come into the office. And I said, well, I can't come right now. I said, but I can be there maybe in an hour. And she said, that's okay. Now, in hindsight, I should have handled that differently.
No, for sure, yeah.
Because I thought, well, no one's ever going to notice. Everybody expected me on vacation anyway, except her. And then I felt incredibly guilty. Did she know that I was at a hair appointment for my daughter? Probably not. But I felt bad about that because I felt like, yeah, I should have handled that differently. And I was 40 at that time or something, probably early 40s. But
well, and like here's the thing, right? And this is something, let's note for all podcasts that we talk about stuff. We give this, well, you, and I'm here to comment on it, really, give this great advice, right, about how do you prepare for these positions and stuff like that. Don't think that no matter how informed you are, you become bulletproof,
No, you still
there
do
will
silly
be
things.
a mistake, you'll do something silly. It's fine, it's not the end of the world. But what you want to do is, and I think this courtesy episode and remote work is a good example, you want to put yourself in the position where they can give you benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
Because you want to show, outside of this rare once or twice instance, that otherwise you're on the ball. You're through with it, everything and stuff like that.
Well, and in this case, I could have said something to her. And if there had been an issue, I probably would have. It wasn't. She was fine with me coming in an hour later.
Yeah.
And that all worked out. But, when I look at it, I'm like, I should have said, hey, I'm still going to take the vacation day, but I'll just come in the morning. But you know what? I can't say that I haven't made that mistake at other times because you think, no one's really expecting me. I'll cancel the day. It's not like you're trying to get away with anything, but you're like, I'm still going to put in 6 to 7 hours. And I don't really feel like I need to take a vacation day.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really important. And I think too, you just have to be accessible. If you're accessible in a remote or a hybrid position while you're not in the office, it will go a really, really long way. Just make sure you're accessible. But the benefit and why nobody wanted to return to the office after everybody went remote was one, you can sit in your jammies and work all day. You can go get a cup of coffee. You don't have to get dressed. You don't even have to take a shower.
I didn't go too far into this part of the statistics, but it's watching remote work statistics is the funniest thing ever.
I've never looked.
Because you'll always hear the opposite side of the argument where, in my opinion, it's give or take. It depends on the situation, right? I can see the argument, like I said at the start of the podcast, but there is the argument that things like work-life balance is generally better.
That's true.
A lot of people report better mental health and psychologically on tests and stuff like that. And that's true. Not saying that isn't. There are benefits. But it's one of those things that, like you kind of said earlier, it's a slippery slope. You're on a knife's edge here, and being how much more prevalent it is right now is because, it's still very prevalent. I think it was like 34% of all employers still offer an option to some position about it. And I think what I would say is, like, at the end of the day, here's the deal. We still don't know the perfect solution of how to do remote work. Some people want screen recorders on all the computers, which with the recent data privacy stuff going on, I very highly doubt that's going to stay for very long. But there's stuff like that. There's I know I have been up for positions that I haven't gotten that are like we kind of treat it asynchronously as long as you do the work and show up, you know. But that was a smaller company, so it depends. But yeah, I think here's the thing, I guess, wrapping this episode in a bow, you know, I think there's a courtesy you must understand with remote work, and it's not a one side benefits entirely, you know. It's like you are getting given a benefit, you should
I'd like
bestow a
to know if,
benefit in
too, as you
kind.
wrap it up with the bow, does anybody have any questions about remote work?
Yeah, I think remote
That'd be
work
interesting.
can be very, especially I've worked it, you've worked it a little bit.
I love it.
Um,
Personally, from my perspective, I love it because I can wear sweats. I don't have to put on any makeup. I don't. You have to look decent on camera, but you don't have to look great because you can put filters on your screen and all
yep.
kinds of crap.
But yeah, thank you all for listening. We'll
Yep.
see you all again next time. Goodbye.
Bye.